Did you know that Buffy the Vampire Slayer has an unaired pilot that was worlds apart from the pilot we ended up getting? Well, you're about to find out. Unaired pilots help visually bring a script to life so that networks can figure out if it's a good fit for their lineup, and test audiences can give feedback on whether or not they'll be tuning in for a show like that every week. These pilots often have a fantastically lower budget than their aired counterparts, test out the chemistry of the actors currently signed on to the project, and give writers and showrunners a chance to further develop the show based on the feedback they'll receive once the execs and audiences have watched it. This happened with Buffy the Vampire Slayer, and after having watched the unaired pilot, I'm glad it did, because there's actors that ended up getting recast, sets that ended up getting changed, dialogue that got dropped, and even more changes that might have some people thinking there were two completely different shows. Here are some differences between the unaired pilot and the final aired version that we got. Number 1. Bad quality. No, seriously, this thing looks like it was recorded on a VHS tape, and if you thought the quality of standard definition was bad, Buffy's unaired pilot would like you to hold its beer. What's crazier is on top of the poor quality, most of the pilot appears to be in black and white. The color does fluctuate throughout the runtime, with some scenes having more color than others, but for the most part, it was given Bewitched before they switched to color in Season 3. Number 2. Never officially released. All versions of the unaired pilot out on the internet as of whatever the release date of this video are leaked. Neither the Warner Brothers Network, nor Fox, nor Disney have ever released this footage to the public, and the fact that we have access to it on YouTube without it being behind a paywall is a miracle on its own. Shout out to whoever leaked it a decade or more ago. Unfortunately, the problem with it not having ever been officially released goes back to point number 1, because if it were officially released, at least the quality would be slightly better, and if a Blu-ray box set of Buffy was ever to be released, it would be a good idea to have the unaired pilot on there in definitely a higher quality than whatever's available right now. Number 3. Sitcom runtime. Buffy was always going to be a 1-hour drama when it was being pitched because there was no way it would work as a sitcom given its budget expectations. So it's pretty wild that the unaired pilot is the closest we'll ever get to a Buffy sitcom since it only has a 25-minute runtime. This is most likely because the producers and or network didn't want to invest too much money into the unaired pilot and wanted the plot of the show effectively communicated in as short of a time as possible to see if the show would still be able to resonate with audiences and be worth picking up at the end of the day. Honestly, it was giving ABC's Sabrina the Teenage Witch, but with more mature themes. Number 4. Low budget. The unaired pilot is like Buffy from the dollar store, and that's because there was very little budget to work with. There are minimal sets, the wardrobes aren't wardrobing the way that they do in the original pilot, it's also why the runtime is so low, there's little to no special effects, and only one scene that shows a vampire being dusted. Also, the music score is really different. Number 5. Different logo. The Buffy the Vampire Slayer logo looks like it came out of an 80s sitcom in this unaired pilot. It's genuinely surprising that they didn't just rip off the Buffy the Vampire Slayer movies logo, because even that looked much more modern than what was used in the unaired pilot. Thank goodness the actual pilot corrected that and we have this iconic logo. Number 6. No theme song. This one is an actual tragedy because the Buffy the Vampire Slayer theme song is a defining aspect of the television series and captures the bad buttery of the show in 50 seconds only the way Nerf Herder can. To not hear it in the unaired pilot really added to the surreal feeling of watching an episode of Buffy that wasn't really an episode of Buffy at all. Number 7. No introduction. The initial episodes of Buffy would introduce the concept of a Slayer and explain what her duties were, letting the audience know a little bit of lore about the show so that they would know what to expect from the episodes they're about to witness. The unaired pilot does not have this intro at all, and to be completely honest, I think it works against it. Number 8. Well received. Regardless of the quality-related issues, it's pretty obvious that this version of the pilot was well received enough that the show was picked up by the WB for 13 episodes, slated to premiere as a mid-season show in 1997. Wow, that makes me feel old. To be completely honest, the unaired pilot is a fun watch and gives preference to the humor of the show instead of the horror. If you're a fan of the Buffy the Vampire Slayer movie, you're definitely going to appreciate the unaired pilot. Number 9. Cordelia being a menace. While we come across a more complex version of Cordelia in the aired pilot, the unaired pilot has more of an underdeveloped Cordelia who is an absolute menace to society. Under 45 seconds, she insults 5 people, including Willow and Xander. I'm so glad they gave her more nuance in the original show while still retaining her cutthroat quips, but opting to space them out instead so she doesn't come off as the worst person in the world. Number 10. Characters that are missing. A lot of characters that are important to Buffy lore are missing from this episode, which goes to show how much more development the show went through after it was picked up by the WB. Buffy's mom, Joyce Summers, is nowhere to be found. Angel is missing. Willow and Xander's friend Jessie has ceased to exist. And the craziest one of all is that there is no mention of and or reference to the Master. It's pretty obvious that the vision put into practice for this version of the show had more of a Demon of the Week approach to the show, which the first season did have, albeit with a serialized story running in the background that the unaired pilot didn't even bother setting up. Number 11, characters that aren't missing. What's interesting is that this pilot actually has characters that don't show up in the original pilot. First one is Harmony, played by Mercedes McNabb. Harmony's first official appearance on Buffy is in episode 2, but she actually had a few lines in the unaired pilot and can be seen hanging out with her bestie Cordelia. Some things never change no matter what the universe. And another character that makes an appearance is none other than Jonathan himself, who chats with Buffy while they're waiting in line to be let into the bronze. Thing is, he looks way cooler in this version of the pilot than he does on the show, which totally means that the unaired pilot is being influenced by the augmentation spell Jonathan casts in season 4. Number 12, different actors. Yes, it's true, there were recasts on the show before it premiered. Alyson Hannigan is nowhere to be found in the unaired pilot. Willow is instead played by Riff Reagan, who had a much more timid approach to Willow's character. Principal Flutie is also played by a whole other person, with Stephen Tobolowsky portraying him as a purposely ignorant but funny school principal, whereas Ken Lerner's version of the character was kind but oblivious. And this one doesn't really count, but it counts enough for me because of the impact it has. The vampire book is played by a whole other book that doesn't look anywhere as good as the final prop that we got in the official pilot. Shout out to the prop department. Number 13, odd vampire dusting effect. The vampire dusting effect in the unaired pilot looked like something out of a Goosebumps episode, and I'm not surprised that it did, because the cost to dust a vampire in the actual picked up show could allegedly be $5,000 per vampire, which is actually insane. This obviously got cheaper and easier to replicate over time when more seasons would come out, but when starting out, it's no surprise that the unaired pilot had to forego this because they had no precedent to work off of. Number 14, different library set. While the library in Welcome to the Hellmouth has more character, the one in the unaired pilot looks like your run-of-the-mill cookie-cutter school library that is built depressingly enough to keep school kids out of it. Number 15, final battle location change. In the original 2-part pilot of Buffy, the first episode's final battle takes place in a crypt, and the second episode's battle takes place at the Bronze. And while the Bronze is mentioned in the unaired pilot, the final battle instead takes place in the school's theater. This theater is also where Darla is first introduced with her male victim, whereas in the aired pilot, it's a classroom. And there you have it, folks. There were definitely a lot of changes that Buffy the Vampire Slayer went through behind the scenes, and after having seen the unaired pilot, they were 100% for the better. Jumping from a 25-minute to an almost 2-hour version of the premiere helped flesh out the characters, gave breathing room between scenes, and explored the carefully curated mythology of the show. Give this video a like if you enjoyed yourself some Buffy content, hit that subscribe button for more fun facts and deep dives into your favorite old school shows, and leave a comment down below about a fun fact you know about Buffy that not enough people talk about, and or what you thought about the unaired pilot when you watched it. Chat with y'all later. Have a good one. Bye.